September 10, 1931, Salvatore Maranzano is waiting for Lucky Luciano in his office on the 9th floor of the New York Central Building. Maranzano has recently won the Castellamarese war against rival Joe Masseria, but four goons disguised as IRS agents show up at the meeting and gun him down. With his death, the old guard gives way to the new blood, and Lucky Luciano, the instigator of the murder, decides to revolutionize the internal structure of the mafia. The New York Central Building, now the Helmsley Building, is where Salvatore Maranzano was killed and is the place where it all began. Luciano thinks of everything. He abolishes the title of Chief of Chiefs, creates the Commission and the National Crime Syndicate, but on the name to be given to the new criminal organization he enforces the Sicilian saying a meglio parola uccidersi and si dici. Old rule, new mafia. No need to give it a name, because, says Luciano, it's our thing, it's Cosa Nostra. Before we begin, I remind you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss chapter 2 of the saga. History and origins of the mafia in America, the influence of Siciliani and Cosa Nostra. The origin of the Italian Mafia. To better understand this story, let's start from Italy. We are in the 19th century. In Sicily, a secret organization called Mafia emerged. Sicily was at that time a land of conflict, poverty, and oppression. The Italian Mafia developed as a reaction to these difficult conditions. Many Italians at this time emigrated to America in search of a better future. Hardships in Italy, including lack of jobs and social unrest, drove thousands of people to American shores. These early immigrants brought with them traditions, values, and even social structures that would contribute to the formation of the American Mafia. The birth of the American Mafia. As Italians arrived in America, Italian communities emerged in cities such as New York. But Italian immigrants faced prejudice and discrimination. This environment of isolation and oppression created fertile ground for the birth of the American Mafia. Early criminal activities of the American Mafia included alcohol smuggling during Prohibition, extortion, and gambling. Figures such as Salvatore Maranzano and Joseph Bonanno began to consolidate power within Italian communities. Immigration to America. The history of the U.S. Mafia begins in Italy in the second half of the 19th century. The southern areas of the peninsula are still very backward, the population is living in destitution. And the most courageous, or desperate, decide to start anew elsewhere. Large numbers cross the ocean to embrace the American dream. And those who survive the journey are convinced that they have reached the land of great opportunity, a country where there is room for everyone and everyone can make a fortune. Most migrants stay in the cities of New York and New Orleans, but integration with local communities is nearly impossible because the ruling classes are conservative and frown on newcomers. Italians are somewhat dark-skinned, gibberish, gesticulate, dress shabbily, and become synonymous with dirt and crime. They are considered on par with black former slaves on cotton plantations. Migrants do not speak English, and can only do manual labor, the menial kind, a condition that pushes them to put up a united front and isolate themselves from the rest of the population. Mafia-style criminality originated from those Sicilian migrants, linked to Cosa Nostra, who arrived in America very often to escape death sentences or prosecution and resumed underworld activities along the lines of those they carried out in their homeland. The ranks of these early Italian-American gangs also end up welcoming those compatriots who have been disappointed by the American dream, honest people who, however, see crime as the only way to get rich and live above their economic means. Larceny letters, intimidation, and larceny are beginning to spread, but, at least for the time being, the areas of responsibility are still limited to individual Little Italys. New Orleans and the lynching of Italians. The first episodes related to the paramafia phenomenon concern New Orleans, where, At the turn of the century, there is an ongoing war between the city's two main underworld families, the Matranga and the Provenzano. The local police chief is Irishman David Hennessy, whose name is on the Provenzano payroll. His efforts to end the escalation of violence touch only the Matranga family, and on the night of October the 15th to the 16th, 1890, a group of unknown men ambushes him as he exits a saloon. The rush to the hospital is futile, but, before he dies, Hennessy manages to whisper this word, Dagos, a derogatory epithet typical of anti-Italian xenophobia. The police immediately launch an investigation and turn on the approximately 30,000 residents of New Orleans, Little Italy. After a series of confessions extracted under mistreatment, 19 Sicilians end up in jail. But not all of them are linked to underworld activities. Some are honest citizens whose only crime is being Italian, and there is insufficient evidence to charge them with Hennessy's murder. On March 13, 1891, the judges acquit the defendants. The public disagrees. They believe the mafia bribed the jury, and 61 New Orleans citizens, all distinguished members of the U.S. community, decide to take justice into their own hands. Around 10 a.m. the next day, an angry mob armed with Winchester rifles storms the local jail and starts an indiscriminate hunt for the Italian, cell by cell. 11 of the 19 defendants die either hanged or shot in what will go down in history as the New Orleans lynching, an episode triggered by the first egregious mob murder, that of David Hennessy, who was to have testified in the trial of a leading member of the Matranga family, the Black Hand, Joe Petrosino, and the New York Camorra. If Kelly's is a small Italian crime syndicate, the Black Hand is an organization that encompasses several para-mafia street gangs, whose main activities are larceny, counterfeiting of banknotes, and extortion by means of larceny letters, the latter marked by the imprint of a black hand, from which precisely the name is derived. We cannot yet speak of the US Cosa Nostra, but the Black Hand is that primordial nucleus where there are men of honor who, compared to other Italian-American gangsters, try to maintain the exclusivity of Sicilian origins, with attached customs and traditions imported from Italy. Their reach is limited to Little Italy alone, where the police unleash against them the Italian branch investigative team, headed by anti-mafia pioneer Joe Petrosino. The New York lieutenant for years, is the thorn in the side of the Black Hand, a lawman who wants to rid his countrymen of the bad apples who extort money through intimidation. His honored career came to an abrupt halt on March 12, 1909, when he was in Palermo to investigate links between the Black Hand and the Sicilian Cosa Nostra, and gunmen gunned him down with 4 shots. With Petrosino's death, the Black Hand thrives and continues to take over the activities of rival gangs. Among its most prominent exponents is Joe Morello, whose Cosca has been collaborating peacefully for about a decade with the New York Camorra, another criminal outfit but one with Neapolitan roots. Friendly relations between the two underworld factions cooled in 1915, when a mob war broke out that lasted until 1920. The winner is the Black Hand, which can then extend its control over all of New York even further at the expense of the Jews and the Irish. With the beginning of the 1920s, the era of the White Hand Gang and the 5 Point Gang, from whose rib Johnny Torrio and Al Capone's Chicago outfit would be born, also comes the emergence of a criminal monopoly of the para-mafia gangs, whose activities are no longer confined to Little Italy alone, but encompass the entire city. Stay tuned and activate the bell so you don't miss part 2 of this story. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. Write in the comments if you have curiosity about other topics and share the video with your friends.